Greetings, everyone. Excuse me. All right, so discuss the two constitutional theories that evolved around the questions of Reconstruction. Also describe the three phases of Reconstruction. Finally, describe the promise and hope of Reconstruction and its eventual demise. So the Reconstruction period, roughly from 1863 to 1877, this is the period that begins to emerge as the Civil War is coming to an end and lasts until and Reconstruction lasts until 1877. And so it was a period of physically reconstructing the South and politically and socially reconstructing the South, or at least an attempt at doing so, trying to take in consideration of what to do with 4 million newly freed people in the South now that slavery was over. As a result, one, just of the war itself, and then two, later in 1865, the 13th Amendment. So, concept one, discuss the two constitutional questions, or the two constitutional theories that evolved around the question of Reconstruction. So, Reconstruction had been a subject of discussion in the North since the beginning of the war. As usual, the discussion took place on the plane of constitutional theory. The constitutional controversy centered around 2 points. One, were the seceded states in or out of the Union when the rebellion was crushed? From the northern perspective, the secession was illegal. Strict logic reached the conclusion that the former states of the Confederacy had always been and were now part and now states of the Union with all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. Both President Lincoln and later President Johnson supported this view. President Johnson was Lincoln's vice president in a second term and who would assume the presidency after Lincoln's unfortunate assassination. Both these presidents saw the states as indestructible, and they were never out of the Union for the simple reason that they could not be. This theory, though vigorously opposed by radical leaders, received judicial support in the Supreme Court case of Texas versus White in 1869, when Chief Justice Chase, speaking for the majority, stated, "The Constitution, in all its provisions, looks to an indestructible union composed of indestructible states, considered therefore as transactions under the Constitution, the ordinance of secession, and all the acts of her legislative intended to give effect to that ordinance were absolutely null. They were utterly without operation in law. The obligation of the state as a member of the Union remained perfect and unimpaired." Radical Republicans, on the other hand, are going to have a different view. So, if on the contrary secession was valid, the South might consistently be treated as a conquered territory without any legal rights that the Union was required to respect. So this is what radical Republicans will be dealing with. And in the hippocampus lessons dealing with this, in your essay, give examples of some of the radical Republicans. So that's a little bit of research you have to do on your end, and what exactly their thoughts were. Aside from what I want to be sharing to you within this lecture, dealing with Reconstruction. Upon that theory, then, could Reconstruction proceed? If the states were still in the Union, it was the citizens who were out of their normal relations with the federal government, and these could be restored through the pardoning power of the president. This theory was supported by both Lincoln and Johnson. So, again, the radical Republicans of Congress managed to prove to their satisfaction the states had lost and forfeited their rights and therefore could be treated as conquered states. But again, the president is going to think differently, right? And so this is going to put the president, the executive branch, and the legislative branch on a collision course. While brushing aside embarrassing legal obstacles, radical congressional leaders sought refuge in constitutional dialects to justify their military rule of the South. Their arguments were what was based on the clause in the Constitution that, quote, the United States shall guarantee to every state a republican form of government, unquote. Yet, for 3/4 of a century, this clause had been interpreted to mean that Congress could sustain the pre-existing governments. But now radical Republicans wrenched it away from this traditional meaning and insisted that for the southern states at least, a Republican form of government must include black suffrage. However, at the beginning of the Reconstruction era, only 6 northern states permitted the black African Americans to vote, and 2 new states, Nebraska and Colorado, tried to come into the Union with suffrage limited only to whites. Right, so there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on with the radical Republicans, which really shows many of them their true colors. They really want to stick it to the South for causing so much trouble during the Civil War, being as tragic as it was. But this leads us to our second question dealing with Constitution, and this will be basically the basis of Concept 2. But the second question dealing with Reconstruction: who should control the Reconstruction process? The President or Congress, right? And this will be the fight post-presidential Reconstruction. So just to summarize Concept 1, the executive branch, both under Lincoln and Johnson, are going to consider the states, and then they were never out since it was illegal to secede in the first place. So the states that they created under the CSA never even existed in law. And so that's going to be the executive branch. And so it's just a matter of bringing them back in into the fold as quickly as possible. Congress, led by radical Republicans, are going to consider the former Confederate States of America, the South, as conquered territories. And their main emphasis is going to be integrating 4 million people into society, both politically and economically, and trying to bestow them rights. This is going to put President Johnson, the president who will assume power after Lincoln, on a sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied with my words, but they're going to collide, right? And they're going to have a duke it out. Basically, Congress later is going to take over the process of Reconstruction once it leaves Phase 1. So Phase 1 of Reconstruction, just to throw this out as part of the essay question, is presidential Reconstruction. We'll talk about that more in Concept 2. Phase 2 is congressional Reconstruction, or radical Reconstruction, it's sometimes referred to. And Phase 3 is redemption, when a lot of the things that were moved towards Reconstruction as far as integrating African Americans into society politically and economically and socially are basically forgotten about with the intention of trying to squelch a lot of tensions that were developing between the South and the North post-Civil War. All right, I'll talk to you guys later in Concept 2. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.